Update: my 40 daughter, 21, has cut me out of her life when she found out I had a baby garbage. 6 weeks ago I had just gotten home from a lunch date with a guy that I've been seeing when my front door buzzed. I thought maybe it was my gentleman caller. I'm not at the booty call stage, but perhaps he just missed my smiling face, and buzzed them up without asking and opened the door and was shocked to see Dirk come out of the elevator. I let him in and did my best not to yell at this young man who took part in brainwashing my daughter, and he stammered out that he was sorry for everything that had happened. He then laid out the entire story. He had gone to the large public university where he ultimately met Moira because it was far away from his parents, as he had a lot of doubts about what he had been religiously indoctrinated with his whole life. His parents had only agreed to let him go to the school on the condition that he stayed active in a specific student group, the facility advisor who was known to the local church as being an upstanding evangelical. Dirk had agreed and would go to events, but also tried to use his time on campus to explore and better understand why he felt what he had been taught was wrong, going to other Christian groups' events and even a gasp mixer for all religions. He ended up being president of the student group because the advisor recommended it, and Dirk doesn't know how to say no. Unfortunately, and unbeknownst to me, Moira was roofied a few weeks into her sophomore year. Luckily for her, Dirk was at the party, identified what was happening, and got her out of the party before anything worse could happen, and stayed with her until she was physically recovered. Moira was understandably traumatized, but for her own reasons didn't feel comfortable sharing it with me, which breaks my heart to be honest, or going to the school's counselors for help. But she did latch on to Dirk, and he admitted he didn't mind having this pretty girl around a lot. Since part of his routine was his evangelical stuff, Moira started going to those meetings and events, and the local church, and possibly because of her trauma, really embraced it all. This wasn't great for Dirk since he was trying to pull away, but now this girl who he liked and who he also felt like he needed to protect was getting into the evangelical stuff. He wondered if it was a sign from God that he needed to ignore his misgivings. In the spring semester, when the virus shut down the school, Dirk asked Moira if it'd be possible that he could come home with her, but she said that the opposite would be better, so they went back to his hometown, where the church refused to close. So now Moira was really only going to 3 places: the house that she was staying at, that was full of very nice but very evangelical folks, Dirk's parents' house, who were also very nice but very evangelical, in the church, where I'm not going to pass judgment on if the pastor was nice or not, but who was preaching a very strong brew that Moira readily drank. When Dirk was told by his parents and the pastor that he should marry Moira, he proposed. Moira said yes, and he took a job in a call center run by one of the parishioners in the church. When I pointed out that the only time we talked at the wedding, Dirk tried to get me to join his church, but he has a different recollection on that conversation. Dirk says I was being cornered by his creepy uncle and that he came over to get me away from Hansy Harold, not his real name, and literally couldn't think of anything to talk about, but that I had brought up how Moira had gotten more religious, and Dirk claims that he was saying that his church does that to people, but not necessarily in a good way. Anyway, marriage wasn't all that Dirk or Moira thought it would be. Moira was feeling isolated, and Dirk kept suggesting talking to me more, which eventually she did. She also started to spend more time with the pastor's wife and would come home and point out that the pastor and his wife have 11 kids and that they should have a big family too. Dirk actually pushed back on this and said that he would avoid his marriage responsibilities from time to time, specifically because he didn't want to impregnate Moira. Sometime in the last month, Moira told me that Dirk recently admitted to her that he thought about getting a vasectomy but thought doing so in secret was betraying Moira, so he just worked on his pull-out game, which caused further strife between them at the time. When Moira told Dirk she was pregnant, he got very depressed but tried to support his wife as best he could and was at least happy that she was happy about it. When Moira miscarried, she told him God was punishing them for him spilling his seed and told Dirk to spend the night somewhere else. He spent the night at a friend's and texted Moira the next day, but she only told him that I had come in. He decided to come home after work and said I was shooting mean looks at him right away, which is 100% accurate, because all of this was very different from what I had been led to believe by Moira and by what I misconstrued about everything, and so he stayed away from us and the next morning left as quickly as he could. However, a few hours later Moira called crying and asked him to come home, which he did. She didn't go into detail about why I had left, but she told him she knew God would want her to forgive him if he'd get her pregnant. When I called him at work, even though he did want to talk to me, he panicked and did the opposite and basically hung up on me. He said he wanted to reach out to me after that but didn't know my number, but also felt he was doing wrong by Moira. When he asked for advice, he was basically told I was a godless heathen, so best I wasn't involved in their lives. Things got better between Dirk and Moira as both of them started to put in the work that a marriage needs to succeed and start listening to each other. About 2 weeks before Dirk showed up at my door, their town was engulfed in scandal. It was never explained to me exactly what happened, but I guess the pastor was involved in some shady financial business and it was something that Moira had put money into, and the whole scandal made Moira reconsider her religious fervor. Dirk seized on this and begged Moira to leave town with him, but Moira was feeling very embarrassed/stubborn/ashamed and didn't want to reach out to me. Dirk convinced her that they should pack up as much as possible and just come to me, as he was sure that I would take them in and help them. So this conversation was quite lengthy, and when he gets to the part that Moira is with him, I jumped up and started yelling about where she was. He told me she was at a coffee shop down the street, so I basically ran there and the two of us ugly cried as we reunited. We went back to my apartment and the three of us continued our conversation. There were a lot more tears and hugs and apologies all around, and I told them that I would help them as best as I could. I'm not exactly swimming in money, but I bought a queen-sized bed to put in Moira's old bedroom, and my not-quite-boyfriend helped Dirk get an office job. Moira got a retail job and is talking about re-enrolling in college in the fall, which I think is great. They are still living with me, but on Monday we looked at an apartment just down the street from me, as both are adamant about being close and they will hopefully be signing a lease there very soon. I am doing my best to see Moira who she is now, an adult woman who is flawed just like all of us, not the teenaged girl who was my best friend. And Dirk is a sweet kid who's trying to find his place in the world and needs to be a better advocate for himself. The past few weeks he has come with me to my church, and we'll see if that's more his speed. I think he desperately wants to find some sort of connection to God, and I recommended he tries to connect with my pastor, who is a lot more open-minded and articulate about this stuff than his old pastor was. Moira is also feeling things out. She's going to therapy on her own, and the two of them are also planning on going to couples therapy to really firm up that all-important base to their marriage. So I'm very happy to share this update, and thank you all again for your support and kindness.